Okay. Call this meeting to order. All right, I've got this is the Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, and this meeting was posted as required by the Texas Open Records Act. And we'll go ahead and start with the first item, the public comments for agenda topics. Do you have any?
Mr. Chairman, there are no requests for public comments for agenda topics.
And the next item is going to be Lori Rivera, Instructional Systems, and a continuous cycle of improvement. This says she needs to stay another 2 years.
So good evening. Board of Trustees, Dr. Pecan, senior team, audience. So we have a very interesting topic. Last month we talked about what we were doing with our structures and how we were trying to beef up some of our instruction and leveraging the people that we have in our systems. So this is a continuation of what we've actually started doing already for this coming school year. Instructional systems and our continuous cycle of improvement, right? So as always, we start with our strategic plan. That's what guides our work. That's what we're using to make sure that everything's aligned and that we're creating systems to improve our outcomes. So today in particular, we're going to talk a lot about our academic achievement, our college and career readiness, making sure that we're aligning our systems to enable students to have self-directed learning and communicate their learning journey. Utilize data to inform a continuous cycle of improvement to design the student learning experience and close our achievement gaps, and develop a culture that promotes authentic relationships, collaboration, and high expectations. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. We did have our leadership retreat that we had for 2 days where we get all of our leaders together and we do some learning and make sure that we're also preparing for the school year that's coming. So what you see right here, I know all of y'all had the wonderful Ms. Garcia teach you a lot about accountability and how it's changing. So we know that one of the big changes is how it's weighted now, right? Depending on the enrollment of students tested, they all have a number of how they're weighted. So what you see off to the side right here, all of these numbers, that's actually the percentage that goes into the accountability. So those numbers there on the top, accountability, is what the actual amount of points that they have that goes into the big system, right, for all of our district. And so we put our schools into feeder patterns because now more than ever, we need to work as a team. With the new accountability system, I know we always concentrate as a former principal on our campus, but we can no longer have that mindset. It has to be a team, and all of us, what we do, inputs into that class accountability for the district, right? So we all have to be going the same direction. So what we did is we wanted them to see, if I'm closely, I'm a 5.4, right? Let me see, there's 1.3, buoy, how much they're 1.6, but together as a feeder, how much do all of us have together into the system? So it's a 12.4. And you see that as you go along, right? We did the same thing with our next team right there that you see with Gutierrez. We did the same thing with Memorial. We did the same thing right here with Vela, and then with Vernon. And then you can see the high schools are by themselves, but you can see the tremendous amount of weight that our high schools have, right? So up on top, that 57.7 is now what I'm dealing with, right? Elementary and middle school, and that's what's going into the accountability. But then you still have your 41.5 that is from our high schools. So very important of what they're contributing, but also understanding that if I do well in one category, I still have to keep in mind, if I'm not doing well in growth, that's going to impact the system, right? So we can no longer think of what's my letter going to be, it's what is the district going to be, and what do I need to do the best I can to position the district in a good way. And so off to the side, this is nothing new, we have our TLF, which are directors, strategists that work with us, a content specialist. Every campus has a shoulder partner that works with them. And so as we're pushing things out during the year, that person is going out and working with the campuses to make sure how can we support you, what does your data look like, do I need to go into classrooms, all of those pieces. So every campus has someone that's working with them and making sure that we're on point. These are just some pictures of our leadership. Did you see they all got some binders with data, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And they were working together as teams there. You can see that Mr. Garza is a support there for Dishman, and you see Ms. Gamboa there with Bella, right? So they have their support person with them already, planning, looking at the data.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The key SAC with no points and ECA with no points, can you just say a few
So
words about that?
ECA doesn't have anybody that tests for STAR,
Okay.
right? But they get the accountability of the district, so because they still have to have a letter ready. And SAC goes back to their home campus, right? So that's why they don't. The ones that are already in the system somewhere else, that's how they flow there. And so talked a little bit already about the alignment to the accountability system. It's a weighted system, so we have to make sure that we're all really working together to make sure we have some good outcomes. So reinforcing the collaboration and teamwork, focusing on instructional priorities that we talked about last month, leveraging the strengths within the team and sharing best practices, and creating open communication and collaboration within the schools. So if I go back here and we look at this as an example, one of our highest performing schools over the years has been Bowie, right? So putting them in these theaters like this, the beauty of that, they can start working together. And so maybe those other schools can set up and I can go look at Bowie and see what are some of their systems. What are y'all doing well? Or I can go see this other campus. And so it's also getting those relationships and leveraging those high-performing campuses to help guide our other campuses of what are some systems and structures they can put in place.
And right, because we don't have high school in there, but high schools will also participate in that whole collaborative space. It's just that we're looking today at those elementary and middle school leaders.
And so also, of course, like I said, the communication and the collaboration is super important within our schools. And so there you can see there's a notebook. The Cardinal one was really, really thick because what we did was we actually ran the data by teacher. And so every year we start looking at student data, but I feel like we skipped a step there. Because at the end of the day, if all of your students aren't doing well, those aren't the students, right? That's a delivery of instruction. So we need to go back and look at our teachers and study their data first. And so before this,
Can I ask a real quick question?
yes,
So when you have that TLF support, can you just speak a little bit to like how that individual, what's the function of that? Is it a facilitator? Is it, they bring ideas or data back? Like what is that?
and so every campus needs something different. So they meet with the principal, they look at data, and then from there they formulate the plan. And so it looks more like a support. What is it you need me to do to go come and help? Whether it's look at classrooms, do I need to give some PD? And if not that person, they become the go-to. I'm going to get Ms. Garcia to come do something on accountability. I'm going to get Ms. Romero to come show something on. I'm going to get Ms. Rushka to come to your campus. So they also become that liaison between the campus. What do you need? And they bring them to them. So.
And you all are probably very familiar with on-site support, right? But we would have targeted schools that had on-site support. And the approach we're taking this year is that everybody needs some type of on-site support. So you have a liaison, and based on some of the feedback we got at the end of the year with our survey, employee survey, they want a better connection with the central office. So for us to understand the campus operation, but also for the campus to understand the central office and what we have to offer. So that's a big part of some of the work that we're going to be doing with the campus improvement plans. But it's an expansion of this whole on-site support. Everybody has room for growth. And so how do we make sure that everybody has that support that they need?
And the beauty of it too, a lot of our directors are former principals. So they walk that walk, and so sometimes they may have something that maybe that principal didn't think about, well, have you tried this? So that also brings that lens. So I'm a very visual, hands-on learner. I wanted y'all to see some of the things in the notebook because I think if you see it, it'll make more sense. Some of the reports that we gave them. I blacked out for the instant the names on there, so you would know. But this first report is called a quadrant report. We get this from NWEA Math. And what it is, and I did the math, on the bottom you see I just checked mark math there. This is a particular teacher and how her students did in her class. This is real easy to read because this side right here is, where they're high and there's high growth. This right here too is where they're high as well. And over here's where they're not growing. We don't want them in these quadrants that aren't showing the growth, right? So where we want them is over here on this side because they're showing some growth, right, for us. And so you can see it's right there, low achievement, but high growth. So we want them growing, right? So the child may not still be where they need to be here, but they're growing, they're showing growth. So you have these children that are high achievement, but maybe they're not growing as much, right? And so as a teacher, I'm gonna look, as an administrator, I'm gonna look, if I see a lot off to this side over here, I'm kinda gonna worry, or even here where people aren't, where students aren't growing, I'm gonna worry, right? And so the principal's got one of these for each teacher on their campus, right? So they could look at that data and see, what does that look at a bird's eye view? What is the trend for this teacher? Of course, you can't get everything from just one, right? So behind that also we gave them, if they were STAR tested by a teacher, this is called a quintile report. And I'm not blacking out all the students, but what it does, it gives you a spread on how your students did. And you can see the percentages. So if it's swayed over here on the lower end, where you see quintile 1, we want them all going towards quintile 5, right, the masters. But at a quick glance, you can see how that class ended up. So we did that by teacher as well. So now I'm going to look at one piece of data. What does the growth look like? What are the percentages of where my students in STAR look like? And then the last one that we gave them, that they have by teacher, I love this one. So this one actually compares the teachers, and they already had the data to compare them. How did I do compared to the campus? You can see how the legend is right there. How did I do compared to the district? And how did I do compared to the region? We don't have the state yet, right? So as a teacher, I can see, am I neck on neck with everybody? Am I lower than the other? And so as our administrators are looking at this data, they're able to have those conversations with their teachers, right? Then they were given some questions to ask themselves, our administrators. So the first question, a real basic one, right? What trends do you notice in the data? As you're looking at all your teachers and you're looking at the data, what do you notice? Identify by teachers who are my high performers and who are my low performers. Look at them by grade level. Do I see a trend by grade level? Is it all my grade level, or do I have some really high ones that I need to look at there? And then, of course, secondary by content. How are we doing by content? Do we see some patterns there? The next question, can I leverage the data? Do I need to provide some PD? Do I need to team teach, departmentalize? Do I need to assign some mentors? Or get somebody to coach another teacher? If I have a real high performer and one low, can I pair this to go see the classroom, go see what I'm doing, plan with them, how can I utilize that? Do you see a correlation with the data and your TIA designation? So if we should be seeing our very good data with our teachers getting a TIA designation, right, a high one, also do I see any correlation with their T-test scores? What does that look like? When I'm going in there evaluating, does it align to what I'm looking at? And then what are my next steps as an administrator? After I looked at all my teachers and their data, what am I going to do with this data? And then, of course, always the last question I'm asking, how do we support you? How can we support you with that? And then you can just see there, they were all working with their notebooks and in groups there. You see the Gutierrez and Rodriguez leader, they're all there working together and looking at their data and making some connections. And so now, as the campuses go back with their teachers, they're going to share this data, because they already have it by teacher. The teacher's going to be able to do some reflection pieces. And as they get ready to set their goals for T-test, they should very much be aligned to what they're looking at, right? So when I'm going to look there, what's my goal? What do I want to achieve this year? What is it that I want to achieve? What is the correlating dimension? What is it that I need to work on? What action? How am I going to accomplish that goal? What am I going to do? When do you anticipate your goal to be met? So very targeted, like what does that look like for me? And then how will I know the goal has been met, and how will I know whether it's impacted instruction or student achievement? And of course, that's going back to the data. Am I seeing that growth? And then our teachers will do the same thing with student data, right? The exact same thing we model for them with the teachers. They're going to go student by student, have that conversation with the student, let the student set some goals and see how they're doing, so the student knows exactly where they're at. And then the last piece that we need to make sure is our families, empowering families. So that's where our student-led companies come in. So at the beginning of the year, what does that look like for our parents? They need to know from the very beginning, where is my child? Where is my child sitting? Are they on point? Are they behind grade level? Are they above? What I need to do to help them? How are we going to utilize our families? I always say as instructional strategies. What can I do at home to help them? And if they're above, what are we going to do to challenge them, right? But parents need to know from the very beginning, so there's no surprises. Where is my child? And that's it. That was our day that we had with data, making sure that we're ready for the year.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So the feeder team approach, is that a new approach this year, or is that something we've been doing?
We've done it in the past, but I think we haven't created a system where it's like fidelity to it. I think we've done it before, but we've never had something systemic where that's a way. And so one of the things that we're going to do with that is as we meet in our principals meeting, which those will be a little bit different flavor, we're going to meet at campuses. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to have learning walks afterwards. And so they can highlight something on that campus and show what's going on. But the whole intent is to look at the feeder pattern, because if I'm Coakley and I'm receiving all of these campuses, let me go back. I shouldn't, when I'm studying, I should be looking at their data too, because you know why we see that dip to 6th grade? But if they're handing me 5th graders that are performing, that's the beauty of that too, then I need to figure out what's happening if they're dipping. Because if they're handing you students at a certain performance level, what are we doing to keep them there, right? And so that's going to open the communication, I think, between our 5th and 6th grade teachers, which are super important, 8th and 9th grade as well, right? Because those are the years that we see that disconnect a little bit. And so having those teams like that will help us have those conversations amongst the teachers as well, opening doors where maybe some 6th grade teachers need to go visit some classrooms at Bloom and see what they're doing. How are you doing the blended learning? What does that look like? How can I bring that to my classroom? Or maybe we need to go see a middle school. What does that look like there? What is it that we have to get our 5th graders ready for? What does that environment look like? Can I do something different? And so all those pieces.
I love it. Yeah, and so this report has got a lot of revealing information, and it really makes you, if I'm a teacher reviewing this, I'm really internalizing it. Has this been available is this the same data that's been available the last few years, or is this new?
So DMAC was new last year, that particular report, but we've always had report with our teachers and how they fare with other ones. We give them that as well.
And I will say this, it's all in the systems, right? It's in the systems of how you use the data. Because there's a ton of reports that we can access. This year we decided we're gonna identify, like, this is what we're looking at, first of all. And secondly, the principals have a very clear path of what our expectation is when the teachers come back. So it's this whole concept of yes, looking at the data, and we've always been really good at that. Where we need to refine is then what do you do with the data? So now as they're setting their T-test goals, those typically have been, we've gone through the motions of it. And depending on the strength of the principals, they've been real good at tracking it and sometimes not as effective. All of that is changing to give them more structure and create the systems. Like when we say this is the goal, because based on what your kids need, like you set your goals as a teacher, and then now we have to track that throughout the year. So it's a very different type of system for looking at the data during the year. We're very good at looking at it at the beginning and maybe at the middle, but it's every month, how do you do that? And the other big thing, in addition to the learning walks, is that when we come together as a Harlingen learning community every month, we are going to have metrics that as a district we're going to follow. How do we know that we're going to be successful at the end of the year? And it doesn't happen 3 or 4 times throughout the year, right? It's every month working with our senior team and saying something's going on here in reading, and so we need to look at that metric, and that's the PD that we bring to the principals every month. The beauty of having the TLF people is that they oversee those programs, right? And they have to have a connection with what's really going on in the classroom, because it's the same as everything else. If we push out a product and we hope that everybody understands it, now we're going back to hold them accountable for, did you really understand the charge, and are we meeting the mark? So it's a very different system based on PLC Plus, but just in general, like we have to get to a point where it's a well-oiled machine, and it's just everybody understands that improvement cycle.
That's fantastic. I mean, all of us really want to see improved performance of athletes. So I'm really zeroing in on things that are really different to try and get different results. And I see it. So I think that's fantastic.
Even with teachers working with principals, T-test is supposed to be a coaching tool, right? And even with that, we are streamlining and recreating the expectations of that. Now for teachers, principals have to be in front of teachers, not just once or twice a year, but every quarter. Like, where are you with your goal? how close are you, how far are you? And it's just, it's all the professional learning community, like how do we restructure that? So with PLC Plus, we have that. And we know that the administrators and the instructional coaches, there's too many teachers to be able to cover everybody with that number of touch points. But the other thing we have to do is we have to tap into teacher leaders because they're practitioners. And we know it's different when you learn from a practitioner as opposed to an administrator. So it's tapping into those teachers and saying, I know you don't want people to come into your classroom, but guess what? You have something great to share. And just creating the synergy around that. I mean, this whole concept of, a growth mindset, and also, like, we're in it together. Everybody has to come together if we're going to be the strongest we can be. So that's the premise behind it.
So if a campus is weak in one area, you can send somebody like from Bowie, who excels in that area, to that campus to walk through and help them. We've never done that before.
I think this is going to open because they're going to feel very comfortable with each other. And I think one of the things that we haven't tapped into, like Dr. Bertrand said, is we have some leaders that are very strong because they've got systems in place, and some that maybe aren't. So just as like we expect our teachers to learn from other teachers, our leaders can learn from other leaders as well. And so I think that's what this whole system is going to leverage. Another one that comes to mind is Ariana. We moved her from Louis to Rodriguez, and we saw what happened there, right? She's very strong too, so she can definitely, go and add some value to Mimi Sanchez. And I mean, there's several of them, right, that have just really sharpened their craft, and they've done great. We moved her from one school to another. Before you know it, that school's an A the next year, so it's all those systems they put in place. And so why not leverage that knowledge that they have when they have already figured out what needs to happen for the schools to be successful?
And also the fact that we haven't have we in the past had the parent-teacher meeting at the beginning of the year to find out what level the kids are at?
We've always had parent-teacher conferences, but it wasn't so much data-driven. I think now it's more, and at the beginning with our little ones, probably the teacher will facilitate, but towards the end, the goal is the child to facilitate the conference. That's why it's student-led, and say, this is where I'm at, this is where I need to be, so the child can also understand what those goals are.
I just really wanted to commend you on the overall strategy, and then the plan for action. I love that you figured this out, and then built a system around being able to put those numbers, and just, it's almost like a track meet, right? Everybody's got to, do their part, and it all adds up, and okay, there we go. So I really, right? So I really like that. So really, it's just, I'm excited about it. Thank you. Great job.
Any other questions?
I mean, my question's answered, like how often, right, my question is maybe like how often, are we meeting and kind of going through and seeing if those metrics are being met, but I think that question's my answer. I just think it's awesome. I'm excited to see how this works.
So we can't wait to see what you're going to do from now to 5 years.
I was really
Just
excited
saying.
when you said you'd stay at least 2 more years. So, thank you so much.
That's one of the goals, Lori, like we can't,
You can't leave it.
Hashtag Lori for 5 years.
You got to see the plan through.
That's right.
Start the plan, work the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. Okay, our next item is Operation Plugged In, Coach Davies.
So as Coach makes his way up here, I just want to thank him and Kara ahead of time because they have been doing a lot of work throughout the summer. You know that these two programs that these two administrators oversee have done some pretty phenomenal things. And so while we're going to hear a little bit about athletics today, it is very similar and aligned to what Ms. Hoflinger is doing with arts. It's just working with these two, Mrs. Scoggins, to expand some of the great work that they're doing. So I'll hand it over to Coach Davies.
So Operation Plugged in line with strategic plan goal number 2, well-rounded graduates and beyond the classroom. I forgot to do my formal greeting, I'm sorry. Good evening, Chairman Powers, board members, Dr. Portman, and audience. So what I wanted to share with you before we get into Operation Plugged In is really what it looks like for all of our coaches before they ever have kids in front of them. So there are a whole series of required trainings from the UIL and also from our school district before a coach can ever work with kids. This is a list. This is actually a screenshot from Rank One. That's a software program that we use a lot in athletics for physicals and for also tracking the compliance of our coaches to make sure that they've completed all their trainings. You can see there, I never really counted, but it's a lot. Some of it has to do with health and safety, some of it has to do with rules and regulations, but that's the list. And then the way it works is all of our coaches are entered into this system, just like our students are. And whenever they are in compliance, then they come up as green. Whenever they're not in compliance, they come up in red. Many of you have children, you probably uploaded the physical to Rank One this year. It's the same process for your students. Whenever we go to check out equipment, the first thing that our trainers and coaches do is look to see is the student green. If they're green, that means that they're cleared and they're ready to participate. If they're red, that means that there's an issue somewhere and we have to track that down and get it cleared. So that's really how we're able to keep track of all of our coaches. I think we're up to nearly 200 coaches in HCISD. Then the next thing that we do is organization, supervision, and compliance. And so this is just a listing of all the steps that we do in addition to the training to make sure that we provide a great experience in our athletics and fine arts. Just as Dr. Proton mentioned, they do something similar in fine arts for the student, for the parent, and for the coach. And so the first thing that we do prior to the start of the season, like we just kicked off volleyball, football, water polo, and cross country, we have a preseason organizational meeting. That's where Coach Lorio, myself, sometimes Sandra Flynn, we meet with those coaches. We invite their staff to be a part of that. Some of them take advantage of that, some of them do not. And we have a checklist, and basically we go through everything that could happen, has happened, or we foresee in their season. From making sure you have the correct number of games, this is how you request a bus, this is how you go on an overnight trip if you take a tournament, this is expectations of you, legal expectations, what your coaches, how are you going to utilize your assistants. There's a whole list of things that we go through, just trying to get off on the right foot. Then the other thing that we do in athletics is we require a parent meeting. And I think that is a really good thing to do, where the coach is basically covering the schedule, all of the rules, regulations, and policies that are associated with that program. And then the parent will sign that and basically acknowledge that, yes, I understand that these are the policies and regulations of this program. And then if there's ever any type of question on that, we have that document to be able to say, we talked about this. The other thing that we have is we have a handbook. And so I get a lot of phone calls and I tell our coaches, don't ever start with, I'm sorry to bother you, I know you're busy, what do you think that I do, right? I'm here to be able to help you, but we also have a handbook. And so one of the things that I try and do is drive them to the handbook, because a lot of the answers are in the handbook. You don't have to always call, you can go and access that. And that's something that we worked on whenever I first came. And it's basically the nuts and bolts of how you do everything in athletics. Another interesting thing that we do is campus support check-ins. And so many times what I found is if I go directly to my office, I may never leave because the work will just stay there. So a lot of times Coach Lorio and myself, I'll call him in the morning and I'll say, I'm going to Gutierrez. And he'll say, I'm going to Copley. And we start our day at a campus and we just walk into an athletic period or a practice and we just watch. And then, making sure that what we talked about in the preseason organizational meeting and in the handbook is actually occurring. Then the next thing that we do is the season review and action plan. At the end of the season, for the high schools, I send all of the head coaches an email, and it's the season review and action plan. And basically it's a document that they complete, and then they set a meeting, and they come and we go over that, and it's part of the evaluation. And we look at the number of athletes that you have, what grades they're in. There's an evaluation instrument for each of their assistants. We talk about their staff. We talk about things that went well, things that didn't go well. A lot of the systems that Lori talked about, that's really the operative word of this whole thing, is we have a system to be able to make sure that our coaches are equipped to be able to have the best program possible. And so all of those things, in addition to, last week we had our coaches in service, and we break it up into 2 days. The first day, really, we run it as an athletic director's office, and we cover all the nuts and bolts, and then we actually allow them to go to their campus and feeder patterns. One thing that we did this past year is we actually invited Leandra Ortiz to come and speak, and she presented for an hour on do's and don'ts and all the legal things that are happening in sports. I don't know if you're following the Northwestern, and it's hazing and bullying and inappropriate relationships. It was a pretty heavy conversation, but it was needed. So those are all the things that we do, and Kara does in preparation to get our coaches ready to be able to put the best program in place possible. With Operation Plugged In, one of the things that we're looking at along with Human Services is to be able to take all these things that we're doing that are proven to create good coaches and good programs and implement them across the board in our district. And so, for example, an ROTC person, possibly, or maybe a chess club, or some organization that's not affiliated directly with the UIL Fine Arts and Athletics. We want to take all these things and really create a manual, a handbook. We want to create some trainings and prepare those people before they ever take on the responsibility of leading a club or an organization. Your first time to go on a trip, that's the worst time to be planning, how do I take a bunch of kids on a trip and not have a disaster, right? And so, what Operation Plugged In, we were in a senior team meeting, and the conversation was we want to get our kids involved. It doesn't matter if they're involved in athletics. It doesn't matter if they're involved in fine arts. If that's what it is, if that's their passion, great, but it may be something completely different. And we want to be able to try and identify what that is and then offer it and then put a person in charge of that program set up to be able to make those kids want to come. Because education is a people business. And you can have the greatest club ever, but the person leading the club, if they're not equipped, it's not going to go great. And so you already know it's choir, but whenever kids are plugged in at the campus, those things are going to happen. It's documented over and over and over and over and over. And so the target group for this year really is everyone, but specifically the 6th grade. For me, in my time here, I think the 6th grade year is pivotal because you're coming from the elementary and now you're going to the middle school. And then the next group is really whenever the 8th graders transition to Kano Academy. Those are the 2 pivotal years, in my opinion. You could argue Kano going to the high schools also. But we've been working with ACE. We had a meeting with them today, partnering with them to be able to identify, okay, 6th graders, what is it that you're really passionate about? What is it that you would like to have interest in, that we could bring someone in and create an organization or create a club, train a sponsor, train a coach to be able to supervise that and give you a great experience. So that is Operation Plugged In a nutshell. It is fluid, it's growing rapidly. It's something that I think Kara and I are very passionate about because we see the value of being involved in extracurricular activities. It really doesn't matter what it is. There's benefits to all of it. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Sir?
So it's basically, I mean, we're just trying to get students to compete in something, right? I mean, is that the whole concept?
Compete or involved.
Involved in something.
Yes, sir.
So
And-
I want to,
Yeah,
real quick,
please,
because
go ahead.
on our ACE program, we have monies that we can leverage to make sure that our 6th graders are plugged in. When they come into 6th grade, they have a few things that they can participate in, but they can't do a lot of the UIL things or they can't do UIL until 7th grade. So in that year, we want to make sure it's such a pivotal year for kids because they're leaving the elementary, coming into secondary. So how do we leverage ACE to have them plugged in and do something that they love? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular organization. But even, and earlier when we met with Mr. Powers, Michelle brought something up, but even for a sixth grader to be involved in like their own version of a mock trial, how cool is that, right? Or Michelle also talked about like drones, like maybe we could have a segment of ACE where kids come in and they learn about drones and they learn how to operate them. There is so much that our kids can do. Yeah, dog training, yes. I'm wondering if that's no, I'm joking. But it's about how do we get kids to love what they're doing at school? Because if we do, they will come every day. And so we'll increase attendance, but they have something that they love to do. So that's really the whole premise behind it. And the second thing is, just like Rob said, our people have to be ready they have to be equipped correctly. So with Mrs. Scoggin, it's about running them through a fall and a spring training and saying that this is what we expect of you. Because the worst thing we could do is say, hey, great, you want to be in a robotics organization? And then we meet once a year. Well, we have to plug them in, and we have to make sure that we get them where they want to be. Working on student surveys and things like that, but that's really going to help us to retain those sixth graders, because you can by default get them ready for seventh grade too, right? That's how we started. We used ACE after school to start our soccer program many, many moons ago, and then we did that with volleyball as well. So how do we change the landscape of student opportunities with sixth grade? And we'll start there. But also in the fall, start targeting fifth grade and tell them, like, this is what you have to offer at sixth grade, so stay with us because it's super exciting. And then eighth grade going to ninth. So it's a huge retention tool, but also attendance.
Sure. So I just want to commend you, and I appreciate the more context that's helpful. I just want to commend you on this. This is an idea that's going to, I think, yield huge dividends for these students and their families, but also huge dividends for student outcomes as well, to your point, not only attendance, but just more engagement and better, and they're going to perform better in the classrooms and things like that. So, and then just, getting it out there, but he's not here yet, but, God willing, if all goes well in the 21 days and everything else, we've got a gentleman coming to be super. That's going to, I know, be a dream team combination with Dr. Cortab that has is pretty much at the cutting edge of this very concept and engaging students all the way back into the elementaries, starting in elementary, 4th, 5th grades. So they don't wait until they get them in, junior high. They start, and so they've got a ton of these types of activities to get students involved in competing in something in McAllen. So kind of curious to see how that all plays out with here, but I guarantee you he's going to love already the direction of this kind of deal, and I'm pretty excited. So thank you.
One other thing that we talked about earlier today was, y'all are going to send a survey out, I think, to all the fifth or sixth graders.
The ACE is going to do this.
Find out what they're interested in, what's available, and even ideas they might have.
One of the things that I think about is, the kid that is a gifted athlete or musician or whatever, they're probably going to find their place. I have the vision of the kid that shows up and eats by themselves and has their hoodie on and has their earbuds on, is already in the 6th grade and is starting to check out. And being able to catch that kid and find their passion and completely turn their whole direction around. That's the kid that I'm really looking at. And so in our district, many of our kids are at risk. I think this is really targeted towards the hyper at risk, the one that doesn't really have anything, and throwing a lifeline to them and trying to pull them in and show them that they have the opportunity for a hope in the future if they could just hang on.
So that survey will go to all students, not just if they're in ACE.
Well, it would be facilitated by ACE with the discussion.
It would go to all students.
So that she knows as a director, like what sessions do we need to offer. So based on student feedback, then those are really the after-school sessions that you work on.
Just a comment. I really appreciate what you just said. It's a way to find a way to engage those students. And it goes back to something else you said, that having the right people in place I mean, especially for those kids, right? Like you said, the other one, okay, they're gonna be motivated by that coach, their music teacher, they're, we're set there. Finding the right leaders for those kind of new upcoming programs.
Right.
I really appreciate that you said that. Thank you, and I'm sure I can tell you're dedicated to that, so I can see you're gonna bring that through. In the questions, just some food for thought, and it's probably part of what you're doing anyway, I like that you do the season in review, I think is what you called it. I also really appreciate that, and just the data and, having them reflect back on how that went. And I think looking at trends over time too, like how many kids did you have 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3, that kind of thing. How many kids are getting scholarships 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3, this year, what do you have? So really making the coaches think about their program over time and what they're doing. So I appreciate that too.
Any other questions? Well, thanks, great program.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, the next item is future topics.
So we're looking at continuing our path with athletics and looking at SALT. We've heard a lot about SALT, but those of you that were able to go and see it, it was amazing. So Coach Davies and his team are going to expand that. So that's one of our upcoming topics. And then the other thing is that Mrs. Garza has done an incredible job with our Strong Foundations work. TEA is now using our model for their model to make sure that they're showing districts how to do it right. So I wanted to come back and give an update on that. We are using new adaptive programs and implementing that this year. So I think that's going to be appropriate for you all to learn a little bit about it. We'll be a few weeks into the school year and we'll start looking at data.
Thank you very much. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Great.